시간이 좀 많이 지연돼서요. 바로 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 또 많은 분들이 오늘 80명 넘게 등록을 하셔가지고 원래는 40-50분 생각을 했는데 2배 많이 오셔서 하여튼간 너무 감사드리고요. Definitely I'm gonna speak Korean and English. So, 그러면 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 안녕하세요. 저는 오늘 사회를 맡은 BW 바이오메드사의 우정훈입니다. BW 바이오메드사는 보건산업진흥원에서 시행하는 K-blockbuster의 공식 컨설턴트입니다. 먼저 바쁘신 와중에도 이렇게 참석해 주신 분들께 깊은 감사의 말씀 드립니다. 본 포럼은 보스턴 총영사관 그리고 보건산업진흥원이 주최 주관하는 행사입니다. 본 행사는 한글과 영어로 섞어서 할 텐데요. 먼저 발표와 Q&A는 영어로 진행을 할 거고 나머지는 한글로 진행을 하도록 하겠습니다. 부디 많은 정보를 얻고 참석 활발한 교류가 있기를 부탁드립니다. Ladies and gentlemen, thank for attending for the today's event for while your busy schedule, and we have a special guest as well, and the forum will be held both in Korean and English. But to save the time, the presentation and Q&A in English and the rest of it is Korean. Also, we have a special guest, Dr. Andy Mola. Okay. 행사 순서에 대해서 간단하게 식순에 나와 있는 것처럼 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 유기준 총영사님께서 환영사를 해주시고 보건복지관님께서 축사를 해주실 겁니다. 그리고서 메인 지금 많은 기업들이 가장 궁금해하는 사항이 두 가지인 것 같습니다. 수가와 인허가 제도라서 그 두 가지를 구성해서 구성을 했고요. 그 다음에 많은 질문이 있겠지만 한 20분에서 30분 정도 Q&A, 그 다음에 Q&A가 끝난 다음에 기념 촬영을 할 거고요. 기념 촬영 후에 식사를 하고 끝나기 전에 맺은 말로 요번에 대표단의 그 헤드로 오신 이행신 단장님께서 맺은 말을 해주시겠습니다. 그러면 첫 번째 순서로 유기준 주미 대한민국 보스턴 총영사님께서 환영사를 해주시겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
주 보스턴 총영사 주미대사관에서는 우리 보건복지관께서 오셨는데, 네, 반갑습니다. 주 보스턴 총영사 이규진입니다. You can understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Basically, congratulations. Thank you very much indeed for coming today. 오늘 메디컬 코리아 거점 공간 사업의 일환으로 진행되는 한국 디지털 치료제 기업 미국 진출 전략 포럼에 여러분을 모시게 되어 무척 기쁘게 생각합니다. 특별히 주미대사관의 김상희 보건복지관님, 이행신 단장님, 그리고 박재호 보좌관님, 연사를 참여하신 폴리 호그 로펌의 로스 마글리스 변호사님, 디지털 메디슨 소사이티의 스미트 파텔 디렉터님, 아울러 이번 행사에 참석해 주신 디지털 치료제 관련 국내 기업 관계자 여러분 그리고 참석자 모든 분께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 총영사관으로서는 국내 의료기업들의 미국 진출, 신규 수요 발굴과 기업들이 현지 네트워크 구축을 지원하기 위해 보건산업진흥원과 공동으로 메디컬 코리아 거점 공간 지원 사업을 적극 추진해 오고 있습니다. 특히 지난해에는 국내 첨단 재생의료법이 시행된 이후 선도적으로 한미 첨단 재생의료 협력 확대를 위한 세미나 행사를 개최하여 관련 국내 기업들이 해외 진출 및 연구 협력의 계기를 마련한 바 있습니다. 올해에는 코로나19 팬데믹을 계기로 비대면 진료, AI 진단 등 디지털 헬스케어가 갖는 중요성과 관련 산업 성장 가능성에 주목하여 이번 행사를 준비했습니다. 잘 아시는 바와 같이 우리 정부는 바이오 디지털 헬스 글로벌 중심국가 도약을 국정과제 하나로 제시하고 디지털 치료기기, AI, 진단 보조 등의 경쟁력 강화를 추진 중에 있습니다. 현재 미국을 중심으로 디지털 치료제 연구를 선도하고 있으나 기존 제약산업과는 달리 연구 개발의 초기 단계에 있고 국가 간 연구 생산 기술의 격차가 아직은 크지 않은 점을 감안하면 우리에게도 기회가 있다고 생각합니다. 특히 국내 보건, 의료 데이터 구축 및 활용 역량과 디지털, IT 등 첨단 기술 분야에서의 높은 경쟁력을 바탕으로 민관, 산학 연구소 간 협력을 강화해 나간다면 글로벌 시장에서 성공할 가능성이 매우 크다고 확신합니다. 총영사관으로서는 앞으로도 지속적으로 디지털 치료제 및 바이오 제약 산업 분야에서 우리 기업의 미국 진출을 돕는 노력을 지속해 나가고자 합니다. 아무쪼록 오늘 포럼을 통해 참석자 여러분들께서 원하시는 소기의 성과를 거두기를 기대하면서 축사에 가름하고자 합니다. 대단히 감사합니다.
환영사를 해주신 유기준 총영사님 감사드립니다. 다음은 주미 대한민국 대사관 김상희 보건복지관님께서 축사를 해주시겠습니다.
반갑습니다. 네, 보스턴에서 자주 뵈니까 이제 정이 많이 들었습니다. 네, 저는 보건복지부에서 지금 3년간 주미대사관에서 파견 나와서 보건복지 관련 업무를 맡고 있고요. 특히 한국의 보건의료 산업의 미국 진출에 대해서 각별히 지금 챙기고 있는 상황입니다. 지금 딱 필요한 시기에 이렇게 보스턴 총영사관에서 이 필요한 주제로 이런 자리를 귀한 자리를 만들어 주셔서 정말 감사하고 실무적으로 최대한 지원해 주시고 실행하시느라 고생하는 우리 보건산업진흥원 미국 지사장님과 직원분들께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 내년에는 올해의 또 경험이 쌓여서 계속 의미 있는 그 포럼들이 이루어지고 활발하게 네트워킹 되면서 한국의 보건의료 산업들이 미국 진출이 더욱더 활발해질 수 있도록 같이 협력하는 또 시간이 되었으면 좋겠습니다. 끝까지 경청해 주시고 끝나고 나서 더 필요한 게 있으시면 어떤 게 좀 더 보완되어야 될지 그런 의견들도 말씀 주시면 또 반영해서 잘 실행하도록 하겠습니다. 다시 한번 감사의 말씀드립니다. 네.
예, 국장님 감사합니다. 그래서 아까 말씀드렸듯이 요번에 스페셜 게스트로 DTA 그러니까 한국말로 하면 디지털 치료제 협의체 CEO가 오셨거든요. 그래서 그분을 앞으로 모셔서 축사를 듣도록 하겠습니다. I already mentioned Dr. Andy Mulder is coming, so I really appreciate it. And Digital Therapy, he's a CEO of the DTA and big Red Sox fan, right? After the this conference, you coming to the Red Sox game. So I like to invite him to the podium with a big hands.
So I actually grew up in Philadelphia. So I'm not a huge Red Sox fan, but I am going to the game after this. Thank you for calling me a special guest. I would like to say that I'm not. What I am is a connector, right? So I bring people together who focus on digital health and helping people pass the pill, right? Past the pill. And so we have spent so much time thinking about the evidence that is necessary. We talked about this today at the conference. That's necessary to take a drug, right? And now we look at what we can do with our phones, which is actually, particularly for mental health, so much more important and so much more effective. In the case where you can take a pill that works 40% of the time, and you can work on mental health through an app on your phone that works 80% of the time. So I'm not here to tell you guys what to do in digital therapeutics. I'm here as a connector to help people understand what works better and how we make this possible. And so we've been working with Danny for 3 years now. Yeah, he's been so great, and I have to say it's different. Every country that we work with is so different, but everybody wants the same thing: health for their people, right? So I wanted to come here today as a special guest, right? just to say how important what the work is that you're doing, and the fact that your government is here and actually cares, right? Because we are begging our government to care. And digital therapeutics as a term was nothing a year ago, 2 years ago, but it's helping so many people. So thank you, all of you. I appreciate you having me stand up here. I'm going to the Red Sox game tonight, but I will continue to fight for what you guys need, right? And what we need for human beings to help us get to that next level. So that's all I have.
지금 닥터 몰더가 이제 축사에서 얘기했던 것이 이제 세 가지 워드로 좀 나눌 수 있는 것 같아요. 커넥터의 역할을 한다는 거하고, 그 다음에 멘탈 헬스를 위해서 한다는 거, 그 다음에 에비던스 베이스로 간다는 거. 그래서 이제 DTA가 가는 방향이 커넥팅을 해주면 우리가 멘탈 헬스에 이제 에비던스 베이스에 접근한 걸로 트리트먼트를 한다. 이렇게 좀 이해를 했습니다. 그래서 I really appreciate your the congratulatory remark. Yes. 지금부터 이제 본격적으로 발표 행사를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. So first, we invite the first speaker, Dr. Los Margulies, to the podium. He is the partner from the Foley Hoag, which is one of the best law firm in the East Coast, in the particularly healthcare sector. The topic he's going to present is navigating U.S. coverage and the reimbursement for the digital healthcare. I will take him to the stage with a big applause. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. And it's nice. It was nice to see Andy and Jung-hoon. Thank you so much for having me. As Jung-hoon said, my name is Ross Margulies. I'm a lawyer, and I help healthcare and life sciences companies, including digital health companies, do this. I help you try to understand how to bring your products to market and make them commercially successful. And in particular, I help companies navigate. I mean very stormy waters for digital health companies, very confusing waters, the coverage and reimbursement pathways. So maybe I'll stop and try to frame things. So the US healthcare system, as many of you know, is more complex than the Korean healthcare system. We have multiple payers. We have commercial payers, and in the commercial market, we have dozens and dozens of insurance companies. And if you are a digital health company coming to market, you will need to negotiate with each and every one of those commercial health plans. And each one will make a decision based on what Andy just said, the evidence. And in looking at the evidence, they will look at, what good does your app do or your technology do for patients? Does it save money? Over the long term, what are the health impacts of that application? And what are you charging? How much money is it going to cost me? And they'll make a determination, and that ultimately comes down to contractual negotiations. Much of my work is focused on the other half of the U.S. healthcare system, which is public payers. And in the U.S., we have two primary public health programs. One is Medicare, which is primarily our system for older Americans. So individuals that are over the age of 65 in the United States are entitled to Medicare. And the other is for low-income individuals and individuals with disability, and that's called Medicaid. And they get confused a lot. Unlike commercial payers, Medicare and Medicaid have very, very specific rules and pathways that will determine whether or not a given technology will be successful in the commercial market. Unfortunately, Medicare and Medicaid were created by the United States Congress in 1965, and in 1965 there was no such thing as a digital health technology. There were not, maybe there were computers, but very early on computers. And so as a lawyer, what I'm doing is working with a very, very old law trying to make arguments about why your 21st century technologies should be covered and paid for by the two primary payers in the United States. And so, and what I have here is what I like to call the four legs to the chair. And every chair needs four legs to stand on, and if you don't have one leg, then the entire chair falls over. So this is designed to simplify as you're thinking about coverage and reimbursement and ultimately payment, which is what we're trying to do here, right? We are trying to make your technologies commercially successful, and in order for them to be commercially successful, we need you to receive payment from both Medicare, Medicaid, as well as commercial payers. And in order for that to happen, we have to meet all four of these legs of the chair. And so I'll talk briefly on them. I have too many slides today for 30 minutes, and I'm sure Jung-hoon will share the slides with people afterwards, so you can have all of this that's written here, so you don't need to take notes. Medicare, which is the largest single payer in the United States, and again, that's the program for older Americans, is a program where you need to find a benefit category. So if you were to look up the Medicare statute today, the Medicare law today, you would see 70 to 80 different categories of items and services that are covered by the program. Physician services, dialysis services, drugs, medical devices. Digital health is not listed there. Now, and we'll talk about this, maybe digital health can be a physician service sometimes. Maybe digital health can be a drug. Maybe digital health can be a medical device. And Smit, in a little bit, will talk about the other piece that flows into this, which is the FDA approval pathway. So the first thing one needs to understand is, depending on what your technology looks like, we work with some digital health technologies that have actual physical components. So for example, there's a company called MedRhythms, and they have actual sensors that you wear. Now MedRhythms has a physical component, and so they may actually be durable medical equipment and thus a medical device. A lot of other digital health technologies are just on your app, on your phone, and just this week, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, who oversees both the Medicare and Medicaid programs, reiterated once again that software on a phone is not a medical device because that phone has other uses. So in the Medicare space today, there is not a clear path for coverage and reimbursement. And we're going to talk a little bit about the end about some work we are doing with the United States Congress to try to pass a law that will change that, because that's very important, and that's probably what we need. Once you get past that first leg of the stool, benefit category, you go to coverage. So just because something has a benefit category doesn't mean it's covered. Just like commercial payers that look at the evidence, Medicare and Medicaid will also look at the evidence. So I've been in the negotiation room with multiple digital health companies, and we go before Medicaid directors, we go before Medicare, and they want to know, does it work? Right? Does your technology actually achieve the claims that the FDA has said it will? And it's greater than the FDA standard. So the FDA standard, as Smit will talk about, is what is the FDA standard? Effective. No, not effective. Safe and effective. Safe and effective. Thank you. I'm not an FDA attorney. The Medicare standard is reasonable and necessary. Those are very different. Safe and effective says nothing about whether or not, balanced with cost, it will actually improve overall health. It gets toward that, but safe and effective is not enough. In other words, just because you are FDA cleared does not mean that Medicare, Medicaid, or commercial payers will believe there is enough evidence to support your technology. Once we get past coverage, then we get to the fun stuff. That's payment. Depending on what your coverage and benefit category are, determines what your payment is. So for example, if we determine that your app is really a physician service, there's no direct payment for your technology, which is why most digital health technologies do not want to be considered a physician service, because who gets paid if you're a physician service? The physician and not you. On the other hand, if you're a medical device or you're a drug, there's a clear payment pathway that would reimburse you for your technology. And last, the most boring of the four legs of the chair, coding. in order for a healthcare payer, whether it's a commercial health plan or a Medicare Advantage plan or Medicare fee-for-service or Medicaid, to pay for your plan, they need a identifier, a code. And getting codes is very difficult. There are some digital health apps that have codes now. There is a HCPCS code for that now describes both Pear and Achilles products, for example. Those are two of the first technologies on the market. So I wanted to frame this, and maybe, Jung-hoon, before I continue, do people have questions, and or do you want to?
We have the Q&A session
At the end.
but they have kind of this background information and
Okay.
knowledge, so you can
Keep going. Okay, great. So very quickly, I mentioned Medicare before. Medicare, as I already mentioned, is the program for older Americans and requires a benefit category. And I just want to focus on the last sentence here, which is the main coverage challenge for digital therapeutics today is that you are a 21st century technology, a modern technology, trying to fit into a law that was written in 1965. And currently today in the United States, there is not a clear benefit category for most digital health products. And so to the extent your product is a software application on a phone, Medicare is generally not paying for those technologies today. And that is a problem, and it's something we're working on solving. Again, very quickly, I'll just go through these. Physician services, durable medical equipment. Those are two possible pathways to think about as you examine your technology, whether or not you might fall within those. Each of them has benefits. Each of them has problems associated with them. I would say generally right now the best reimbursement pathway for Medicare technologies today is the DME, or durable medical equipment benefit, because there's a clear payment pathway for the technology itself. I'm going to skip coding because it's boring and no one likes to hear about coding. And I'm going to skip this slide too. I want to mention something that's sort of interesting because it's a market opportunity today that exists. The Medicare program, when it was created, was similar to, I think, the Korean single-payer system, in that it is a single payer that is making all of the coverage and payment decisions. In other words, the federal government itself is paying for your technology. In 2005, Congress created a new program that is part of Medicare. It's called Medicare Advantage. And Medicare Advantage is Medicare, but it's run by private health insurance plans, those same commercial health plans. 50% of Medicare beneficiaries today are in a Medicare Advantage plan, which means instead of having a card, a health insurance card that says Medicare on it, they have a card that says United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna. But the ultimate insurer is the federal government, it's Medicare. Medicare Advantage plans can do something special that other insurers cannot. They can use a financing technique called rebate dollars to pay for items and services that don't meet a benefit category. And remember, I said benefit category is necessary in Medicare. But Medicare Advantage plans can pay for items and services that don't have a benefit category. So we know today there are some Medicare Advantage plans that offer what we are called supplemental benefits, and those supplemental benefits can include digital health technologies. So as you think about market access, Medicare Advantage plans is one sort of go-to-market opportunity immediately available in the United States today without a change by Congress. Okay, we are switching from Medicare to Medicaid. How are we doing on time? How much time? I'm okay? Okay. Give me a 5 minute or something. Okay. So Medicaid is actually larger than Medicare, but Medicaid, which is the program for low-income individuals, is composed of 50 different Medicaid programs to make things more complicated because we wanted things more complicated. Every single state in the United States has their own Medicaid program. In Massachusetts, it's called Mass Health. In California, it's called Medi-Cal. Thank you. So to understand Medicaid, you need to understand 50 different programs. And when you are trying to say, I have Medicaid coverage, that doesn't actually mean anything. You have to go to and negotiate with every single state Medicaid agency in order to get Medicaid coverage. If you're all ready to leave the United States market right now, I understand, because it's very, very complicated. I'm just kidding. We just don't make things very easy. But Medicaid is a very important program, particularly depending on what your technology is. And that's the first thing I typically will ask, right? If you are a technology that focuses primarily on children, Medicaid is going to be the most important payer for you. If you're a technology that focuses on individuals with a severe mental illness, Medicaid is going to be the most important technology for you. On the other hand, if you are a technology for individuals with stroke or Alzheimer's, those are diseases that tend to impact individuals later in life, Medicare will be the most important. And in other cases, commercial payers will be most important. So as you think about your strategy in the United States, think about who needs my product, and that may determine where you focus your efforts first. So Medicaid, this is good news. Medicaid has much more flexibility than Medicare to cover digital therapeutics. And in fact, we know already, including in the state we're in, MassHealth covers digital therapeutics, including the digital therapeutics produced by Paratherapeutics. So they were the first, MassHealth, Massachusetts was the first state in the country to cover under their Medicaid program of digital therapeutics. Today, at the very least, Oklahoma, which is called Sooner Care, is the second state to cover digital therapeutics. Again, these states are negotiating individual agreements with different digital therapeutics manufacturers, so it is not that MassHealth, Massachusetts Medicaid program, covers every digital health technology, but they are open to covering them. So the long and the short of this essentially is there is an opportunity for coverage. The same barriers that exist in Medicare do not exist in Medicaid, but the same framework exists. In other words, coverage is determined on a state-by-state basis. States will look at the evidence, and many states, I will find, will ask for evidence about their own population. So I've been in a meeting in Kentucky with a digital therapeutics manufacturer, with their Secretary of Health, and that individual said, what data do you have on patients in Kentucky? Because I want to know how this works with my patient population. So as you think about navigating state Medicaid agencies, you'll have to think about, was anyone in our clinical trial in the US? Was anyone in the clinical trial in the state? That will be an important consideration. Every state is going to have a different way to pay for digital health technologies. Interestingly, Massachusetts is paying for them like drugs, which is, I think, probably what we would all like to see. The pharmaceutical biotechnology market in the United States is very strong. It is a good environment for the payment of biologics and other drugs. So I think for many digital health technologies, trying to create associations with drugs and say, we're very similar, we have similar evidence base, we should be paid like drugs is one of the goals. And then lastly, the same issue around coding exists. Everyone needs codes in order to identify their technology. And again, so as not to put you to sleep, we won't talk about coding. I'm going to skip some of these. I want to talk quickly about commercial payers, and then I think we're mostly at the end. So about 60% of the healthcare system in the United States is enrolled in some form of commercial health insurance coverage. The difficult part is that commercial health insurance coverage is run by dozens and dozens of different health insurance companies. I named some of them before: Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Harvard Pilgrim, Cigna, Aetna, you name it. And each one is going to make their own evidentiary determination about your technology. The good news is, unlike Medicare and Medicaid, they have no statutory constraints. In other words, they can set whatever payment rate they want, and they can cover anything they want. So for commercial payers, the discussion is really about two things: how good is your technology, and how much does it cost? And so maybe I'll conclude with this, which is, as you talk to commercial payers, an increasingly important part of that conversation today is value-based arrangements. You'll hear the term value a lot, and value-based arrangements. And actually, I should say, it's not just commercial payers. Both Medicare and Medicaid are interested in value-based arrangements. What are value-based arrangements? These are arrangements that condition payment for your therapy on some value-based outcome. In other words, and I give some examples, I'll give you one example. United Healthcare, will pay for your digital health technology, but if it doesn't work, you will pay back to us its cost, right? In other words, essentially a warranty program or a guarantee program. Or we will pay you double if your technology is capable of reducing cholesterol in these individuals by 20%. So more and more payers in the United States are interested in understanding how to essentially get more value out of the relationships. They want to be partners with you to think about how to improve their own members' health. Because remember, for them, their bottom line is how healthy the individuals enrolled in their plan are. And so if you can make clinical arguments about why your technology will lower their overall costs because you improve health outcomes, you'll have very successful negotiations. And so, last but not least, a plug for this. So I have two laws here. Well, one is a law and one is a regulation. The law, as I mentioned, Medicare coverage is very difficult today. This law, which is currently before the United States Congress and has been introduced, called the Prescription Digital Therapeutics to Reports Recovery Act, is a law that would amend the Medicare Act and the Medicaid Act and create new benefit categories just for digital therapeutics. It would create new codes and it would set payment rates for them. It would be a complete game changer and it would revolutionize the digital health marketplace. I don't know if it will be successful. I'm hopeful. If you follow the United States Congress at all, you will understand that it is very difficult to move legislation, and it's very unpredictable. But this is something important to watch. The other important piece is a regulation that came out last year and ultimately was withdrawn, called the Medicare Coverage of Innovative Technology Rule. And that rule would have, so without getting too complicated, if you are a medical device in the United States today, there is coverage and there is payment for you, but it's a little difficult. And this rule would have solved a lot of that by creating a clear pathway to Medicare coverage for those technologies. Unfortunately, it is back under review. We are hopeful that it will make some progress. So here are some key takeaways to leave you with. And I think my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. 많은 질문들이 있을 것 같은데 그것들은 이제 이따 Q&A 세션 때 별도로 하겠습니다. 그런데 가장 중요한 데피니션 중에 하나가 미국의 의료가 퍼블릭 페이어가 있고 커머셜 페이어가 있는데 퍼블릭 페이어가 메디케어가 있고 메디케어가 있고 얘기하지 않았지만 베테란스가 세 개로 나눌 수 있는데 보통 지금 한국에서 하고 있는 연구나 이런 것들이 이제 퇴행성 뇌질환, 보통 대표적인 게 알츠하이머나 뇌졸중이나 이렇게 뭐 파킨슨 이렇게 하는데 이제 메디케어나 메디케이드가 65세 이상의 사람들을 위한 거기 때문에 굉장히 뭐 40%뿐이 안 되지만 굉장히 중요한 마켓이다. 그리고 메디케이드가 또한 페더럴하고 스테이트에서 같이 했지만 같이 파이낸셜리 서포트를 하지만 매니지는 이렇게 운영하는 건 스테이트에서 하거든요. 그래서 그런 것들을 어떻게 효과적으로 할 것인지 뭐 이런 것들이 퀘스천이 있을 것 같은데 굉장히 중요한 그 수가에 대해서 말씀해 주셔서 다시 한번 감사드립니다. 그러면 두 번째 스피커를 초대하겠습니다. The second speaker is Dr. Smit Patel, who is the director of the DME. As Digital Medicine Society is a global non-profit organization to drive abroad medicine to the enhanced private sector. So he is involved with DTx regulatory pathway to work together with the FDA. So I will take him to the stage with a big hands.
Thank you, Jung, and thank you everyone for being here today. I know this is not the most fun topic to talk about regulations, but as we know, it's like wine. I was talking to Danny earlier that initially it's dry, but then when you start knowing a little bit more about regulations of what it applies, you get an expert into it and it just draws you in. And as Ross covered, a lot of important things around getting something reimbursed or getting something paid for your digital health product, it goes in line with regulations. And how FDA is being set up as regulatory bodies is, think about it. I'm a pharmacist by background, so I always think about my patients at the end of the day when I serve them or when I see them in the clinic. If you are taking a pill that goes through your body, you want to make sure it's safe and it's effective. Similar things apply to digital health products. When someone is going to use this digital health product, you want to ensure that it actually works what it says it does. It's safe. It's not going to make different kinds of side reactions, though no one is going to die using a digital health product, but there are other complications that can happen intentionally due to it. So I want to start there. And before I get started, my name is Smit Patel. Thank you for introducing. I represent DIME, or Digital Medicine Society. We are a global nonprofit, and we work to advance safe, effective, ethical, and equitable use of digital technology from research side of the things to even the care side of things. So thinking from clinical trials and where the digital technologies are going to be used in clinical trials to all the way in health systems and care and how it's going to be implemented in the most effective way, say 200 medical centers or 500 different medical centers across the United States. So before I get started, I'll say that healthcare is not regulated. It's the product which FDA regulates it, and it's important demarcation that we need to understand is not everything can be regulated, but it's specific products when they do specific things, that's when the regulations come into place. And FDA is stating in place, and it's not a history lesson, I promise, but 46 years ago, when Congress passed the act, that was the first time FDA got the authority that we are going to regulate medical devices. So if you think about MRI machines, if you think about CT scan, if you think about dental implants, if you think about continuous glucose monitoring that you can attach or wearable sensors, 46 years ago, medical devices were different. They were these large, chunky hardware products. Today, we are evolving into more software-based technologies like this is a hardware, our phones, but then there are so many apps inside that are software, which now sometimes software acts as a function that can help monitor a disease, that can help monitor temperature, that can help even manage when it comes to the digital therapeutics. So that's why when regulations comes in place, it's important to understand that even though the hardware product does not change, but there's software inside that will change. And when individuals use it, it becomes important. Let me give you an example. So there are, actually, before I go there, I'm going to give you an example. If you're using your face recognition technology, there is a sensor in your product that will recognize the face. If that product is going to be used for thermal imaging, meaning that checks the body temperature from the blood underneath your face. So what is happening is you have a hardware product, there's a sensor that has imaging sensors, there's sensors that are thermal sensors that will identify what is the heat underneath your skin. Multiple different parts of the same product. Regulations does not apply to everything. Only the thermal sensors that are inside that will monitor the heat underneath your skin, or the blood essentially underneath the skin of your face, will monitor. So that part is the one that will be regulated. And I think it becomes important for us to understand why there's only small part that FDA will regulate, not the whole sensor, because if outside world, if it doesn't work correctly, if the hardware doesn't work correctly, there are a lot of risk. Take, for example, continuous glucose monitor, that measures glucose in our body or insulin for diabetes patients. If there's 0.1 ml of extra insulin been delivered, someone can die from that. So that's why it becomes important to go into regulations. And now we'll start the fun parts of presentations, I promise. So as we think about digital health applications, we have seen again and again that there are so many different kinds of technologies coming up. There are artificial intelligence and machine learning as algorithms. There are VR headsets that people use for augmented reality and mixed realities. There are software-based medical devices where softwares are now considered as those devices, unlike the hardware. And as the complexity grew, FDA were like, we have never regulated this space. It's new for us. So that's where it started to become like more regulatory pathways came into place. They want to ensure that at the end of the day, when you individual or when I use this product, it will be safe and it will be effective. So why it is important to regulate, and I'll go into very quickly and not bore you into the actual regulations, but right now, if you open up Google Play or Apple Play, you can find over 350,000 apps on Google Play and Apple Play. Every day, there are 200 apps that are coming out. How do you differentiate what is actually going to help you improve your health outcome? Say it is improving your blood pressure, or say it's monitoring your diabetes, or say it's helping you with, for cancer patients, symptoms management. So it becomes important that when FDA has an oversight on a couple of things, one, it's safe, two, it's evidence-based, and it's a good differentiator amongst 350,000 apps in the market. And that also becomes a good differentiator. If you are the builder, if you are the innovator building it, you want to make sure you stand out from all the other people who are just like, oh, I'm just going to create one and put it out in the market, and then no one is going to use it. So the value of regulation starts from not just the evidence side of things, but also it creates a standard baseline. You know, Pear Therapeutics, one of the first digital therapeutics in the US that was approved, that was cleared for opioid use disorder and substance use disorder, they have led to a lot of reimbursement pathways, new reimbursement pathways that started new policies in US. When they reached out to FDA for the first time, FDA were like, we have never cleared a digital therapeutics. But then in 2017, they started thinking about, okay, now we have to regulate some of the software products. Some other things are making sure that the risk, and that's how the FDA is built, it's based on the risk. Higher the risk means more regulations, lower the risk, less regulations, and we'll cover that in a while. But again, at the end of the day, if we want patients or individuals to use these products, we have to build trust. Why do we take medications that our doctors are telling us to take? Because we trust them. We trust that there is an FDA who has looked into the safety and the efficacy side of things, and we can take a pill. We know that we will get better. If we have fever, we will take paracetamols and other medications. We know it will get better. How can we build that trust with digital health is if there's some kind of regulatory oversight, we can build that trust that will lead to, at the end, on a long term, a good adoption that people will start using it, they will use it more frequently, and you will generate a good data, and at the end of the day, a more healthier community, as Andy mentioned. So let's start with who regulates healthcare products in the US. So there are a lot of agencies out there in the US that can regulate healthcare products. So when I say regulate healthcare products, it means that HHS, which is the United States Official Human Health Services, they have 11 different operating divisions. One of them is FDA that actually regulates all digital health products. But there are other small agencies like Consumer Patient Safety, FTCs, cybersecurity. Those are the ones that minor laws that apply, like HIPAA laws that makes sure that the patient data is protected. The cybersecurity laws from CISA make sure that no one is stealing the identity or selling the patient data outside the world. So FDA is the one who does the actual regulations, but then those side laws may also apply. FDA is a must-have. All the others are nice to have. Which is always good if we want to build good products. So I'm going to skip to that and directly go to the definition. So if we think about DTx and digital health products, in US for FDA, everything is clubbed under, it's called medical device. So it's a drug and it's a medical device. Everything in medical devices, digital health products, digital medicine products, digital therapeutic products, be it sensors, be it mobile applications, be it artificial intelligence, algorithms, everything fall under medical devices. And how they define is anything that is intended to treat, diagnose, manage, monitor, cure, prevention of a disease or a disorder, those are the ones that FDA is interested to regulate because they're making a claim. They're telling that, oh, my digital health product or DTx app is going to manage diabetes for people who have higher A1C levels. That's a claim. It's a very strong clinical claim that is being used. Compared to like, if someone's creating an app which will measure how many walking activity or steps they're taking, or if you go to gym and if you wear a wearable sensor and that records heartbeat, that is not making any claims. But if that wearable sensor says that 10 bouts per 30 seconds if you're walking is interesting activity for Parkinson's patient. Now that is important. That is interesting because now you're connecting the technological and operational part with a medical part. And that's where FDA comes in and they will be interested in regulation. So how this has went, and we'll check how many minutes. We have a lot of time to talk about. So how it has worked and evolved around is initially when FDA started, it was a lot of hardware products. So hardware, think about things that you can hold in the hands. Software, I always think about the software parts are ones inside a hardware. So there's a shift into, initially when they were creating the laws, they were hardware-based laws, now it's into software-based laws. The risks, that's how they started. Those higher hardware products that had higher risks were the ones that were extremely regulated, versus the ones software-based have a little lower risk in terms of, for example, if a drug someone is taking and they have a black box warning that it will increase the heart rate to an extreme levels if someone is taking that drug, may lead to someone's devastating diseases or devastating results, then probably that's a high-risk product. It doesn't happen a lot in software-based because have you heard someone was using a software and went into coma? Probably not. Or someone is using a software and had, say, high blood pressure. Probably not. So that's why important laws of cybersecurity comes into place, because those apps can sell the data and that becomes injurious, because it has happened in the US where some of the organizations, not some, there has been some organizations where health data is being shared and the geographical location of those health data is being shared, meaning someone can identify where you live, or that becomes hard because if you are a patient of Parkinson's and if, say, there are 10,000 Parkinson's patient in the US, just an example, and if you see that 5,000 of them are located in the southern region of US, that's an important information. Should not be shared with anyone who's building, because what they will do is we are only going to target the Southern American population. That is not an information that should be shared, or women's health information should not be shared, or sexually transmitted disease information. Those are critical information that shouldn't be shared. So software-based risks have evolved. That's why cybersecurity is an important consideration. Now FDA is looking into it. And then different kinds of programs that FDA came up with, innovative side. So this is the entire classification of all digital health product. They call it medical devices that is in place. So think about class 1, 2, and 3. Very simple. 1 is the lowest risk, meaning think about smart mat. I am standing on a mat. Nothing is going inside my body. It's the lowest risk. If something, it's like mat is very hot, I'm going to step out, I'm going to be fine. So it's a lowest risk category of medical device. If you think about moderate, it has a little higher risk, but not too much. So let me give you an example. Apple's ECG watch, which is a PPG sensor inside an Apple Watch, that was regulated. It's a software inside your Apple Watch that helps identify atrial fibrillation. It's one of the cardiovascular diseases, and why it has higher risk is if the readings are not being collected correctly, that becomes a risk because it may probably not identify the right patient or probably not give the right readings, and that leads to biases in the results, and that leads to wrong decisions that a doctor may make based on those readings that it's showing. So that's why it's a moderate risk. And third is the highest risk, meaning think about pacemakers that are inside the body. Think about dentals or glucose monitor that are inside the body, needs surgical risk. If something goes wrong with a pacemaker, I can't remove it out of my heart or out of the placement. And Versus if something is on a mat, I can always jump off the mat. So that's how FDA thinks about risk classification. Majority of the digital health product, the good news is they fall under class 1 and class 2. If you think about percentage of the classes, that's where you can see that most of the digital health product, class 1 is 35% and class 2 is 53%. So all digital health products, half of probably over 80% are in class 1 and class 2. That does not need specific stringent regulations in the highest category. So the fun part, there are so many pathways that a digital health product can go through. And we are gonna start with the simplest one to a little bit more newer and more complicated one. So if we see 510K, it's also called as pre-market notification. It is one of the most simple, I also would say cheapest and least burdensome pathway. So when does this apply? Whenever there is a product you are building has a similar product in the market where you can compare the safety and the effectiveness of those products, you can apply for 510K, meaning FDA has already regulated another product which is already available in the market. You have built new features, you have built new software and added a layer to it, but it has same safety levels, it has same effectiveness levels. So you can go to 510K, which is quicker and most effective. Where de novo comes in, which is a newer pathway, is even for products where there are no other, say, competitors or no other predicates, that's what FDA uses as a term, there are no other devices in the market, and what you are building is completely novel. And how to know if what you're building is, and we'll go into there are FDA databases, you can search through it, and we'll go through how to search it. But if your product is completely new, think about you are building a facial technology that is going to measure blood pressure, something that has never been done before, something that's completely new that will go through a de novo path. There's third one, which is pre-market approval, which is a little bit more complex for high-risk categories. That's when approval needs to happen. It's like 60 pages of you need to submit your clinical trial studies and the data that shows that it's safe and effective. But a lot of digital health product does not go through PMA pathway, but it's important to know that if you have a pacemaker that you're connecting to a mobile app, that you have a wearable sensors, that's like 3 different digital health solution as a part of the product. If you're claiming that one of those products, especially one that's inside your body, is helping you to manage or monitor disease, then you will have to consider a PMA. There's also humanitarian device exception, which is when in the US, when there are less than 10,000 patients per year, which is called a rare disease here in the US, that's a pathway where you don't have to go through all the pathways, you just directly apply for an exemption where it's more of like, it's unique, there are very low number of patients. Say for example, Duchenne muscle dystrophy. It's one disease that young men and boys of age 5 to 18 are diagnosed. It happens when someone is 5 years old or 7 years old. By 12 years old, they're in the wheelchair. By 18 years old, 20 years old, 95% of them probably pass away. It's a very rare disease, neurological disorder. There are less than 10,000 patients in the US. So if someone is building a digital health product for that specific disease, then they will go through the HME. The breakthrough is the very new one, but also very interesting. If you're building something that's solving a need in the US that is life-threatening. So think about Nightwear. I don't have a logo of the company, but there's a company called Nightwear that created digital health solution for PTSDs. So Army veterans who went out for Air Forces came back to the US. Now they are based out in here. They have PTSD disorders. So for them, it's a debilitating disease. It's of a particular interest to the US government. They want to know, they want to create more digital solutions that goes to the breakthrough pathway. And then pre-certification is very, very, probably the newest pilot pathway that US had tried from 2017 to actually yesterday, they released a new report on the findings on the pre-certification. So it is a new pathway that we'll learn through in just a second. So if you think about it, what is cleared, granted, and approved? So 510K, the easiest one where you have something to compare to in the market already, they are the class 1 and class 2, which are the ones that are cleared. They require predicate, meaning they require something that you can compare your current medical device towards. De novo is class 1 and 2. Again, they are granted. They does not require because you are a novel. You are developing something that's novel. And then pre-market approval is one that are class 3 high-risk products. And again, language matters because when we think about it, we always say like, oh yeah, it's FDA approved. Those are drugs. When we think about digital health products, either they're cleared, either they're granted, or registered, or approved. And it's based on the classes. So class 1 are the ones that are FDA cleared. The simple form, low risk, low harm. FDA granted are the ones that are more class 2 that goes through de novo pathways that shows that they are legally granted, that they can go and market to individuals that, yeah, we are FDA granted. We can market it to everyone. We can disseminate to the clinicians. We can have it for our patients for the use. And then approved is one, again, similar to the drugs. So how can you find out if there are similar drugs in the market before, if you're going through 510K? There is a FDA database. If you go to devices at FDA, they have multiple different databases of 510K, de novo, pre-market approval, where you can actually type down based on diseases. I'm interested in cardiovascular. I'm interested in oncology, based on, or if you know a company's name, you can put a company's name in there and it will populate if that company has gone through an FDA path. If you know the company's product's name, so Endeavor RX's product, Akili Interactive is a company that has produced the video game that was first cleared by FDA. So you can find and essentially it's kind of like a database. So you can find information out there. This is the whole charter history, if you want to, for digital health since 2016. That's when 21st Century Cures Act came in. They gave FDA this new modalities where FDA created in 2017 the new Digital Health Action Plan, where they shared what they were going to do over the next 5 to 10 years, because FDA was given $500 million from the Congress, from the government, to build new pathways so that there are more software-based technologies that can get approved. And that's where they started with the software pre-certification pilot program, the newest one that you saw all the way on the other side. And yesterday, they released the reports of findings on those programs after 5 years, and we'll see one of them. So just a quick overview on what that new pilot program has been. It's essentially what they wanted to do is they didn't want to tell that they wanted to work with companies more than just the product. Why it matters? It matters for larger companies in terms of, think about Samsung. These are the 9 companies that were the first cohort. Apple, Fitbit, Johnson & Johnson, Pear Therapeutics, Samsung, Roche, and Tidepool were the ones they say, if you're going to produce 10 products out of these individual companies coming out, they want to regulate and make sure that you are having good manufacturing practices out of those. So whatever products will come out of the company will be good. That was the initial plan. But the problem is, for early stage startups or new tech developers, that was not working because they don't have 10 products. They have just 1 product. So there are some caveats to it. So just to give you an overview on how it started, in 2017, they were established. In 2018, they built a model. They tried to revise it. They user tested it with a couple of other new, apart from the 9, the volunteers that came in for the organizations to see, is this model even working? And then yesterday, they actually released findings. Yesterday, this is also what came out, is FDA's Policy Navigator. So there are so many policies out there on the FDA's database, it's really hard to find. Even I struggle. The easiest way to do it is Google. Do not use search in FDA because their search engine is not that great as Google. So Policy Navigator was created essentially to help innovators, digital therapeutic innovators, digital medicine innovators, to identify what are the right policies that apply to a product. So they go through step-by-step process. Is the software in my product intended for medical use? And is the software intended for administrative use that is going to be used in healthcare facilities? Because there are different pathways that will apply. Is the software that is in the product encouraging healthy lifestyle? So the reason is FDA does not regulate wellness products. They regulate health products. So apps that are being built just for wellness or weight management or things like that would not be approved by FDA or cleared by FDA, but it would be more medical products that would be approved. Is the software intended for electronic patient records? Because if it's in the electronic patient records, there is a clinical decision support that will go into place. Physicians would be the primary users compared to the patient, so there's different pathways applies to it. Is the software intended for transferring, storing, converting formats, or displaying a data? That is considered as a medical device. If you are using and building a product and it displays the health data and it stores some kind of the health or medical product information, that becomes regulatory. That becomes a medical device, and FDA is interested to oversight them. Is the software intended for clinical decision support, meaning in your electronic medical record? That's the US side of the shop where all the patient records are collected in the EMRs. If it's going to be used in clinical decision support, where physicians are going to make decisions and they are the primary users, then it applies to medical device regulations will apply. And the last is, does the device software functions as a mobile medical application app? So think about a product that has wearable sensors that is either on the wrist, either on the body, that has a mobile application that's attached to it. Then that software becomes more of an interest to FDA, and there would be more regulatory oversight in there. So just to give you a quick overview, and I know we are on time, so I'll make it quick. So at DIME, or Digital Medicine Society, again, main part comes now after going through all regulations, is what we found out. We have a community of over 2,000 people, 2,000 members, and we found out that only 25% of the individuals know if the product should be regulated or not. And out of those 75% actually didn't know what is the right pathway. Should I choose 510K, de novo, breakthrough? I don't know. So that's where we found out that there is lack of regulatory strategy. There's challenges in terms of identifying some of those pathways, and when it applies, who it applies to becomes challenging. And we came out with the new Digital Health Regulatory Pathways project that I'm leading with FDA. There are med tech companies, tech companies. We have associations like Digital Therapeutic Alliance, Consumer Technology Alliance, some pharma organizations from the device side, Harvard and MIT Center of Regulatory Science, essentially all stakeholders coming together. Can we simplify the process? Can we make a tool which ask a few questions, you answer yes or no, and then it leads you to the answer of like, yeah, this product is likely regulated. It goes through a couple more questions, and then you identify what's the right regulatory path. So that's our goal, create a lot of resources that will come out in early 2023. So January or February of 2023, we will release everything. It will be public resources, so keep an eye on. For now, there is also some information that Digital Therapeutic Alliance have put out on their website. It's a regulatory guide. It's 1 or 2 pages to see what classification applies and what are the pre-submissions. So you can check that out. And the last I will leave with how the legislative process works here is FDA will release a guidance. It's a draft guidance. They will give 3 to 6 months for individual public industry to submit comments in terms of what do they agree, what do they not agree on before they come out with a final guidance. And it's always a 2-step process that they go into. And I think it's important because as regulators, if we are going to tell innovators, we don't want to stifle innovation. And if you're going to tell innovators that this is what we need to follow, then we need to involve some of those inputs. And that's how US does, is before they come out with a final guidance on this is what you're going to follow, they come out with like, here's what we are thinking. This is the draft. Tell us what's working, what's not working. And then out of those comments, they will collect the comments and they will update their draft guidance into final guidance. And that's how the legislation process works. We work with German Minister of Health, and we have collected a roundtable series with all transatlantic organizations, individuals, and we release global priorities in terms of how to advance real-world evidence for some of these digital health technologies. It's one of the paper that came out in partnership with German Minister of Health's Health Innovation Hub. And not only in Germany and in the US, France is looking into copying similar models that Germany is building. Belgium is looking into creating new pathways. And there are 2 things that I want to highlight as new, what we have seen, new countries building new regulatory processes. One is every country has this think tank. So HIH, which is Health Innovation Hub of Germany, was a think tank of German Ministry of Health. They helped them identify what does good regulations for digital health product looks like for my country. And it's important because every country has a different healthcare system, different payer system, different kinds of wellness. For example, Germany considers wellness. US doesn't consider wellness as a must-have. Completely different. So what population it's serving and what individual country's healthcare system is, you can start with the standard baseline that FDA has created and then make it and adapt it and make it fit for purpose for yours. So that was a lot of boring, and I'll leave it with, it's not the regulations that are limiting factors, but it is the right regulatory strategy that we need to think about as we think about digital health regulations. So here's my contact. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
예, 시간이 많이 지연됐는데 그래도 Q&A 세션을 하고 또 아까 말씀드렸듯이 자료는 좀 서큘레이션을 하도록 하겠습니다. 그런데 이 세션을 준비하면서 두 가지가 있었는데 하나는 보통 미국에서 하는 많은 컨퍼런스는 PPT를 안 하고 그냥 대화로서 하는데 한국 정서상은 PPT를 해야 된다고 해서 준비를 했고요. 두 번째는 어디언스 분들이 이제 어느 정도의 지식 수준으로 프레젠테이션을 해야 되냐고 계속 디스커션을 했거든요. 그래서 되도록이면 이 텀에 대해서 정의에 대해서도 좀 터치를 해주고 베이직한 것도 터치를 하면서 DTx 종사자들이 얘기하는 이런 것들을 다 터치하려니까 사실은 시간이 많이 지연됐는데 그런 배경이 있었다는 것을 좀 이해해 주시기 바랍니다. We're gonna invite for the Q&A session, even a little bit delayed.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing the presentation. So I'm Ho Jin-shin. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and I'm working on like a pharmacoepidemiology. It's a very, very useful information. So I have a kind of some connected question to both of you. So I was wondering whether, like, compared to like the traditional clinical trial, like FDA always require something like so a lot of like evidence, like in terms of safety and efficacy. But I think I was wondering whether for digital like therapeutics, I was wondering whether like how much level of like evidence they would ask, and also like related to the pathways, regulatory pathways, whether for example, de novo way, like if it's the app is like really innovative, or even if it's not innovative, but it's something like, for example, like a kind of application for kind of improving Alzheimer conditions compared to like currently available like a drug, like oral medication. That in that case, like do kind of developers really need to go through all the like clinical trials, or just they can do simply show like how much improvement like each patient experience? And then that is actually related to the prior like a previous presentation, because I think the many commercial like insurers, they actually require some value-based like arrangement, and I was wondering whether such arrangement would be related to kind of clinical trials before approval, or actually they require more after approval.
Great question, and I'll start with the fact that, you know, regulations and reimbursements are brothers and sisters. Always think about that as twins. So on your first question, in terms of what is the level of evidence is needed in clinical trials to make sure that your product can go through the regulatory path and then it goes through the reimbursement. So there are two reasons to it. One is, if you are going to use your product only in clinical trials, there's this thing called 510K exemption, meaning you don't have to go through all pathways, but it means that you cannot market it. You cannot get it out in the market. So that's exemption if it's going to be used in clinical trials only. But if you plan to, say, market it in the patients, let's take, for example, Alzheimer's that you mentioned. So if you're building, say, a digital biomarker, or you're using wearable sensor to measure digital biomarkers for Alzheimer's, how many steps they're taking, and then based on the data that you collected, say you are saying that your product is helping to reduce it's helping to increase their activity, walking activity for the product. So what is happening there is you're making a claim that your product is going to improve 10% of the walking activity. So what FDA does is when there's a claim that's involved, no matter if it's unique or not, it means it will go through FDA regulations. But if you have built that product and there's no other product out in the market, it's quite innovative and useful. It has happened in past, and there are a couple of steps. If you go through the guidances, you can see there are a couple of steps on when it goes to 510K and when it goes to de novo. When there is a need that is not covered by Alzheimer's is a very good example because we don't have good drugs in Alzheimer's that are going to help. It is likely that it may go through de novo compared to more 510K. And after reimbursement, and then I'll give it.
Sure. So your question was about the interaction between clinical trial results and evidence development, coverage, and value-based arrangements. So every payer is going to look at your clinical trials first, right? That's what they want to know. What were your endpoints? What were your clinical endpoints? Was the study powered correctly? Is there statistical significance? How many patients? One of the pathways that Smit mentioned is called breakthrough. A lot of companies want breakthrough status. One of the problems payers have with breakthrough status is that it has less evidence to get to market than other pathways. And so while breakthrough device can give you some benefits in terms of getting to market quicker, one of the things we found is particularly for commercial payers, they are hesitant to cover breakthrough devices because oftentimes you may have a trial with 40 or 50 patients and they say, we want more data. So sometimes your own clinical trial data will not be sufficient for coverage, and that's where value-based arrangements come in, which is we're not 100% convinced that your data is good enough, but we would be willing to enter into an arrangement where essentially you take some of the risk, right? If this product doesn't work, we won't pay full price.
And as you design it, thank you. Let me give you a case study where we recently found out that, as you think about designing your trials, you have to think about regulatory and reimbursement together. COPD, which is the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a lung disease, similar to asthma, but COPD is more prevalent. In COPD, any kind of virtual solutions, digital health solutions that are built in place, what FDA wants is the primary and secondary endpoint. It's called FEV1 value. How much amount of air you can blow in 30 seconds is what's used in trials, what FDA regulations are looking for, because that's the standard goal line. For payers, what it happens is there was a company who we were advising. They were like, oh, yeah, we got FDA clearance from that. But then payers like, we don't care about FEV1 value. We care about they don't coming back to hospitals. So the outcomes or 30 days readmission rates is what they want to look for. So how much can they reduce the readmission? So I would say as you think about when you're designing the trial, you don't have to think all the way through what your measures will look like. You start with what you want to prove in the trial. Think about what is interest for regulators, what they look for primary and secondary endpoints. And then when you go to the payers, like it is regulated, shows the value. And then when used in long-term 6-month study, when you show versus 12-month study, how much it's improving, you can compare it with the cost analysis of 6 months versus the 12 months. And I think that will give you a better data.
아까 로안 similar text.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for good information. We are the company to develop the digital therapeutics for dementia. And my question is that the digital therapeutics, the algorithm and some SAMD basis, some such kind of mechanism is quite similar with the the advanced the companies like Pear or Akili like that. So my question is there any possibility of going to de novo if the target disease is different? Or we can just apply to 510K because the substantial equivalent means that using some similar technology, using CBT basis, some algorithm, something like that. So which one, what do you think about that? That's my question.
Great question. And I wish it was that easy about if I can say 510K or de novo. I think you will need a little bit more information, and that's why it becomes a little bit complex. So let me tell you what are the factors that will go into determining if it goes to 510K or if it goes to de novo. So if you have something, what you are developing, if there's someone else who has built and who has already gotten clearance in FDA, the baseline is you can definitely go to 510K. Where the distinction comes in is if your product that you have built is more uniquely defining or solving the problem of dementia, in your case, you can up-level that to a de novo grant that can happen. So what FDA will do, and again, it depends on medical claims, so in terms of what is your indications of use, and what is your intended use. Once you define that according to the FDA's guidance, which you'll have to submit as a part of either 510K or de novo, everything goes into it. There are other factors like who is it going to be used for? Is it for adult population versus pediatric population versus what is the age group that it is going to be used in? The third is what the app will do in terms of digital therapeutics and what is the part that you're claiming. Is it a software part that you're claiming? And what is that software doing? Is the software displaying information? Is the software actually treating dementia? If it's treating, what level? I think you'll have to do a little, I'm sure you have done it, more so looking into clinical sides. And once you go through some of those steps that are highlighted, you can easily I wouldn't say easily, cautiously. You can differentiate what is 510K versus what is de novo. 510K is simple. It is easy. If you have something similar, if you prove safety and effectiveness in most quicker and most cost effective, but then it becomes differentiator if you want more funding. If you want larger reimbursement, you can show those de novo. And any insight in terms of how that impacts reimbursement?
No, it would be the same. Yeah. So from a reimbursement perspective, it's the same. I think the interesting question you ask, and I don't know the answer, is you use the same mechanism of action as potentially a Keeley or Pear's product, but you're treating a different disease. And I don't know the answer as to whether, but I have colleagues who would, whether or not that qualifies for 510K. In other words, is that really a predicate if it's a different disease?
And you'll have to look in safety and effectiveness.
So in the stage of some pre-submission, can you get any clarification from the FDA?
Yeah.
For example, when we
Yes.
prepared some documentation and explained some mechanism, something like that, and what do you think about? And then they can give us some of the answer. You go de novo, or you should go 510K. Something
Yeah,
like that.
my advice is to try to find the path that you think is better for you. And so don't go into the meeting, the pre-submission meeting, and ask them, but go in and try to guide them towards the answer you want, I think. But the pre-submission meeting can be used to help. Yes.
Just one question. I'll just add a question. Dr. Smith, what's the standpoint of the FDA regarding to the DTx? They just pretty much open attitude to somebody DTx, apply for 510K or de novo. So what is the they consider it's a secret. So what's the trend nowadays? Is it last year, this year, after DTA is? What is the standpoint of the FDA?
Yeah, they're definitely friendly because Danny and I were on the same panel with the FDA senior advisor from Center of Device and Radiological Health yesterday at the conference. So FDA is recognizing that they need to change, they need to evolve in terms of how they evaluate digital therapeutics and software-based medical device products. So I would say that they have yet not defined digital therapeutics as a definition of the term because 46 years ago, what was written in the books, it's still the same law. It falls on the devices, and what they rely on is the IMDRF, which is the International Medical Device Regulation, IMDRF definition of SAMD, which is software as a medical device. So they are very open to accepting DTx, and we are seeing again and again. For example, yesterday there was a presentation from the new acting director, Brendan O'Neill. He had shared 5 different examples of what are these software-based devices. So I would say the conversations are happening. They are seeing a lot more applications that are coming in. It's kind of like industries forcing them, which is the best because we are seeing a lot more acceptance of it, and they're trying to create new pathways and new guidances that are coming out. So if you see the policy navigator and if you see the pre-cert program report that just came out on Monday, it showcased that for the last 5 years they were studying, they were trying to pilot a new program that involves pre-certification of a software. So it has evolved, and we have gotten a lot further. Yeah.
그 시간상 1개 정도 질문을 더
Hi, thank you for the great lectures. I'm Chan from Everex. We're doing musculoskeletal digital therapeutics. And our question is, because we're all from Korea, we do have clinical data from Korea. We're doing clinical study in Korea. So to go to FDA with that data, do we always need clinical trial in USA or at least other Western countries to match the ethnicity of the population? Is that the one thing? And second one is digital therapeutics has a language barrier, we think. So does that matter? How does it matter? So do we have to do with the English population who speaks English, or just the converting the language doesn't matter in the process?
Why don't you start with the FDA, what FDA thinks about it, and then I'll go to what payers think.
It's interesting and great question because I think this is what FDA is seeing a lot more and more in terms of international innovators wants to market their product in the U.S. And traditionally, it was more around U.S. companies using on the U.S. population going into it. It's a little tricky scenario. FDA recognizes, and we at DIME, we have been trying to share with them that if you measure a heartbeat, it's going to be same heartbeat for an American person versus someone in India, someone in Korea, someone in Russia. The measurement doesn't change. But when it comes to clinical trials, I think what FDA is more interested in terms of the inclusions, exclusions, criterias around how the clinical trial, 1, is designed, 2, is being conducted, what are the parameters that are being used for conducting those designs of the trials. So those are good questions to ask in the pre-sub because that will give you a lot more clarity around what FDA is looking for in terms of those clinical trial designs. Because what you don't want to do is conduct a trial in Korea and then come to FDA. Like, we have conducted trials, but FDA wants to see a lot more effectiveness data or information from the US population. So their goal at the end, if they are the ones who are regulating, essentially those products will be used for US population. So that's where the caveat is. No matter where it is done around the world, they want to make sure it's safe and effective for people in the US who is using the product that was developed in Korea and tested in Korea.
Yeah, and from the payer side, from the reimbursement side, it's a really important issue, and it depends a lot on the technology. So we represent lots of Korean companies that have Korean-only trials, and the question from payers will be how relatable or comparable is your data to a U.S. population? In other words, if we put that same exact app, translate it, and put it in the hands of a U.S. consumer, are we going to see the same health outcomes? Now, if it's a, let's say it's a cognitive behavioral app or mental health app, I would think there are different potentially. There may be differences in how a individual in Korea and an individual in US may perceive things just based on cultural differences that could influence the outcome. So I think it probably depends, you know, you're right, measuring blood is the same, measuring a heartbeat is the same, but measuring the outcome, the impact of software on musculoskeletal could be different. So I think the question will be from payers. I would say payers will be open to having discussions with you, but they will want some explanation as to why your outcomes are relatable to the U.S. The language issue is an issue we're seeing come up already. So I didn't even, there's lots of U.S. laws, not just healthcare laws, and some of those laws are language access laws. So in the U.S., and in particular for state Medicaid programs, there are requirements not only that your product be in English, but one, that it be at a certain reading level. In other words, that it be at the 6th grade level is most states' standard. So about a 12-year-old, I'd say, 12-year-old reading level, and be translated into the most frequent languages used in that state. So in most states, that will mean not just having an English language app, but also having a Spanish language app. Depending on where you are, that could add Chinese or a couple of other different languages. So this is novel because drugs, when you get them, will have a insert, and that package insert usually will actually be translated into several different languages. For a digital therapeutic, the mechanism of action is often in the words that an individual is reading and receiving. So a poor translation, for example, if you just used Google Translate to move your, I know that's not what you're going to do, to move your Korean language app to English language, there could be, you know, dramatic impacts to how that's translated. So I think language is actually a really significant piece to think about. Yeah. Good question.
That's great.
Like the regulatory point of view, harmonization is a very good, very important to translate the Korean conduct clinical study in Korea and get a profile in the US FDA. So do you know any DTA or other regulatory people agency have any movement to harmonize the universal data in terms of the
Yeah, I would say the repository of data has not been started. Where it started is what is the definition of digital therapeutic on international ISO, so International Standard Association, that one of the members from DTA, Digital Therapeutic Alliance, Megan Coder, she is leading, where what they are trying to say is no matter if based on regulators, payers, no matter what geography you are in, you have a standardized definitions on what you're going to use. I think it is important because if we are going to have clinicians who are going to prescribe digital therapeutics to their patients, patients and clinicians want to use the same language. Payers and providers wants to use the same language. So I think international-wide definition is the starting point. I'm not sure if the data will ever be standardized across the countries or on the international basis because, one, data sharing component is harder. Language barriers, as we have seen, language barriers changes a product, and that means that different regulations will apply, different pathways may apply, and the level of scrutiny may also differ. So multiple different challenges will go through when it comes to data standardization.
You have any comments? Only DTA Asia. This is one of the biggest parts. Clinical study in Korea and file in the US FDA or Europe EMEA. So any topic to be discussed during the
we did have a movement in the European side of the things, the Digital Therapeutics Alliance or DTA, in terms of building a policy coalition, as we call it. So we look into the harmonization between countries when it comes to the regulatory pathways and assessment pathways, really, or assessment criteria, I should better say. Now, taking that kind of model forward, where we brought the stakeholders, the trade associations, and governments, and players of sorts to make sure that we're all on the same page, and to allow for smoother transition of the products and the assets between countries. we've taken that model and started kind of the groundworks at the DTx APAC policy coalition setting as well. So I'm very happy to share that DTA is actually working on that. And we're hoping to bring that that's the global stage where we'll be having more of an interregional collaboration and harmonization as well. So.
And I think it's important we all are building similar things, and we are living in different countries. As Andy mentioned, we want our patients to be healthy, or individuals to be healthy. Think about yourself. Like, I think about, like, 30 years from now, when I'll be very, very old and I'll have a lot of gray hair and a lot of grandkids, and if I'm using multiple pills, could I use digital therapeutics and make sure it's safe and effective? And I think it's the right time that we are building things, and it will take a little bit of the time, but I think if we can do it all together, I think that will change a lot of things.
Some mechanism, something like that, and what do you think about? And then they can give us some of the answer. You go normal, or you should go for the 10K. Something.
Yeah, my advice is to try to.
They just pretty much open attitude to somebody detects, apply for 510K or de novo. So what is the, big concern is the safety. So what's the trend nowadays? Is the last year, this year, after DTA is, what is the standpoint of the FDA?
Yeah. That they need to change, they need to evolve in terms of how they evaluate digital therapeutics and software-based medical device products. So I would say that they have yet not defined digital therapeutics as a definition of the term, because 46 years ago, what was written in the books, it's still the same law.
Lectures. I'm Chan from Everex. We're doing musculoskeletal digital therapeutics. And our question is, because we're all from Korea, we do have clinical data from Korea. We're doing clinical study in Korea. So to go to FDA with that data, do we always need clinical trial in USA or at least other Western countries to match the ethnicity barrier, we think? So does that matter? How does it matter? So do we have to do with the English population who speaks English, or just the converting the language doesn't matter in the process?
Why don't you start with the U.S. companies using on the U.S. population going into it? It's a little tricky scenario. FDA recognizes, and we at Dime, we have been trying to share with them that if you measure a heartbeat, it doesn't change. But when it comes to clinical trials, I think what FDA is more interested in terms of the inclusions, exclusions, criteria around how the clinical trial, one, is designed, two, is being conducted, what are the parameters that are being used for conducting those designs of the trials. So,
regulatory people agency have any movement to harmonize the universal data for
yeah, I would.
We did have a movement in the European side of things, the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, or DTA, in terms of building a policy coalition, as we call it. So we look into the harmonization between the countries when it comes to the regulatory pathways and assessment pathways, or assessment criteria, should I say. Now, taking that kind of model forward, where we brought the stakeholders, the trade associations, the governments, and players of sorts to make sure that we're all on the same page, and to allow for smoother transition of the product and the message between the countries. We've taken that model and to the global stage where we'll be having more of an interregional collaboration and harmonization as well. So.
And I think it's important we all